Hey guys, I'm back with the noise pollution. Welcome to another episode. We're giving this mic another chance. I'm just hoping that I'll notice this time around when it dies, but I do also have some precautionary actions in place in other recordings just in case it decides to play with me again. Let's just get right into it. In specific periods of time, I have felt this intense, all encompassing, deep sadness that completely strips me. It feels almost inadequate to just call it sadness because to me, sadness is so surface level. And a lot of times when I feel these deep feelings, I wouldn't even say I necessarily look like I'm sad or feel sad on the surface. I'm not attempting to diagnose myself because I don't have a clear doctor's diagnosis. I just know what I've personally experienced and what my two licensed professional therapists over the years have confirmed and noted, which has been depressive states and seasonal depression. The way these feelings, or better yet, this depression shows up for me is that I have absolutely zero desire to not just do anything, but also zero desire to be anywhere. I've expressed this specific phrase only with a few trusted individuals because it often raises a lot of red flags, and rightfully so. But when I get into these states, the overwhelming thought that comes across my mind is that if I just didn't wake up tomorrow, I wouldn't be mad. Which obviously, if I don't wake up tomorrow, I wouldn't be alive, so there wouldn't be a mad to be, but that's not exactly a nice thing to say. In thinking that, I had never really viewed it as a negative thought because I didn't exactly go through the steps of what it would look like to make sure I didn't wake up the next day. Um, I'm gonna try to keep what I'm saying somewhat mild because I'm not sure how this video might get flagged and blocked, but I hope you can pick up what I'm putting down using context clues. These feelings have been extremely hard for me at times, but I'm in no shape or form qualified to say that I've had a hard life, which creates a cognitive dissonance of sorts because there's this awareness that goes on that if the hardest things I've had to do in my life have been overcoming the pains of my heart and pains from being mistreated from time to time, I am very privileged because there are an infinite number of ways that things could be worse. But also, I just don't want to be here, period. In maturation and education, I've learned that this exact thought phrase of if I just didn't wake up tomorrow, I wouldn't be mad, can actually just be a sign of feeling pressure, which makes a lot more sense to me because, like I said, as grim as that phrase sounds, I've never thought it to be negative. Even though if I heard a loved one tell me that, I would be extremely concerned for their safety. Having it be that my job, as in basketball, often peaks at the same time of my typical seasonal depression timeline is absolutely not fun. um, I haven't only experienced these feelings at the exact same time, but as I've gotten older, the timeline has become more consistent. It does seem too that depending on my different environments at the time that I'm experiencing these feelings, have made it easier to handle, like this past year, or extraneously harder, like in other times of my college career. When I'm in these depressive states, I will also sleep like no other, and I will fall asleep in genuinely any position and at any time. Literally give me 3 minutes and a stable position and I would be knocked. I'm not typically a habitual napper. As I've expressed in my last episode, we know I don't play about my sleep. So when I notice myself napping a lot, it's a significant warning sign to me. I think that I've experienced these specific heavy depressive states at maybe three key moments of my life to date, but each time it just got progressively worse. Once in high school, and now that I've experienced the college ones, the high school one was absolutely nothing. And then two, three actually in college. The first college one was worse than in high school, but not awful because I was sitting on a bed of love given my environment I was in my JUCO. The second time in college was the absolute worst. And then this past year, it was super mild again, which makes me really think that my physical environment has a lot to do with helping or worsening it. My worst depressive state happened, like I said, the second time in college. And it was already when I was in active therapy. So, as awful as it was, being in therapy helped me help myself and finally get some root explanations to some of the things I had been dealing with. Maybe this was a very weak and diseased way to think, but when I was in this awful depressive state, the overarching theme of my thoughts was that it would just be so much easier and more peaceful to be dead. I was consistently praying to God, like, please let me die calmly in my sleep in a way that my absence wouldn't hurt my loved ones, because still at my lowest, I was more concerned and considerate of how my loved ones would feel and how hurt they could be by my absence rather than the fact that I would not be alive anymore, because that seemed like exactly what I wanted. The idea of being nowhere just seemed so much more peaceful to me than any good phase of life that I could have had in the past, or a good phase of life that I could use as motivation to look forward to. I was just so desensitized to these negative thoughts that at the time I was actually viewing this mindset that I had as a freeing mentality, and my perspective had really gone out the window at this point. I believe that this mindset is what makes me want to sleep through life when I'm depressed, because it's just so much easier to be asleep than to be alive. In this phase of my life, though, the sleeping thing was the worst it's ever been, because I learned that my nervous system was just going into overdrive subconsciously. So it was almost against my will that I wanted to sleep, and I had to physically fight not sleeping any chance I got, because my body was genuinely knocking itself out and just powering off. I didn't let myself go as far as to actually think of the logistics and planning anything out ever, thank God. But I do believe that with thoughts like that, the longer you ruminate, the more you establish it as a possibility. And before you know, you're actually rationalizing taking an action like that. And I really do believe I was on the fast track to doing that, because I know in my heart of hearts, I would not have survived another year living like that. Because when I think about all the people that have successfully committed, I think we just don't know how many years and times they battled with those thoughts before they finally accepted it and accepted an end to their own life as their best future. In this awfully depressive state I was in, my body felt like I had genuinely went into survival mode. I was having awful panic attacks. My nervous system was completely obliterated. I've learned recently that the nervous system is actually responsible for tension in your body, and so it can result in an inability to relax, and even in bed, even as far as in sleep or what would typically be calmer, intimate settings, which was also something that I was violently experiencing. I was having intense nightmares that just became more and more frequent and more gruesome. I had sleep paralysis a lot of the time, which I don't really understand it. I just had it. The easiest thing to do to keep myself alive really was to do my absolute must do's at this time, like surviving practice and school. It was just wake up, eat, practice, sleep, wake up, eat, practice, sleep to survive. Mind you, even eating became its own battle. Something I had to do to survive and feel energy was now too energy consuming for me. As someone that loves food and loves food experiences, I've never been a disordered eater of any kind, so please understand that I'm not preaching eating disorder. I'm just explaining that when in that state, my appetite gets so thrown that even eating takes too much effort. Low effort foods like cereal and yogurts became my pride and joy, and even those were hard to eat sometimes. Not trying to be Sienna May type vibe, but there was definitely times that I would sit at the table for 2 hours trying to finish a meal that should have taken all of maybe 10 to 15 minutes to eat. It got to a point where I would try to eat anywhere from like 1,800 to 2,300 calories in one meal sometimes, so that I knew that I was maximizing my calorie intake to as many calories as possible whenever I could get myself to eat. I was handling it with lots of help, but I was really having to oil and butter down my meals, to say the least. I definitely made intense sacrifices, both with the eating and trying not to sleep all the time, because for whatever reason, serving other people motivated me like no other action for myself ever could. So if someone needed company eating, or if I had to stay awake on an afternoon to watch a movie, like things like that, it felt like I shifted into a seventh gear. It was still just as hard, if not harder, because sometimes it was really stronger than me, but service to others always pushed me a lot. I also felt like I was so good at masking my feelings for the sake of others too, but I had gotten so severely unwell that the mask only wore off more and more. I do wonder, and maybe I could go back and ask the people that were around me at that time if I looked like I was super miserable and struggling. But there were definitely times that I couldn't hide that I had been hysterically crying or having a panic attack 5 minutes before practice or 5 minutes before walking into lift. It also did get to a point where I could not stop crying. Like on the planes traveling, in the bathroom moments before takeoff, in the shower, fresh off the wake up, really anywhere that I had some mild privacy, on the bus to a game, I was crying, and this went on for nearly 2 months. The beauty of being me, though, is usually you can't tell when I've been crying unless I just cried buckets, which I did a lot of the time, so I was like giving myself up. I'm a fan of crying. I'm all for crying because I know that that's how your body processes things that your brain or whatever else can be processing at the time. It was just a lot. But around the peak of this valley, I remember being in a hotel room with my mom who had just come to visit me, and I was just in shambles, like quiet in bed, staring into nothing because I could not get myself to go down to the hotel breakfast. I almost felt devoid of tears at this point, so I wasn't necessarily crying yet, but I could not get out of the bed. It's hard to even put myself there again for story purposes because I'm not sure what was going through my mind. I just know that I couldn't get up. So my mom goes down to breakfast and brings me back a yogurt and then sits there on the bed with me and proceeds to spoon feed me the yogurt in my bedridden position as I am now tearing up because this was the last day that she was there and she was going to be leaving that day. Side note, me and my mom both love perfumes. We love all things smelling good. And she had just gotten this new perfume for herself that she happened to bring on the trip and she was super excited about. But after she got halfway through feeding me the yogurt, she got up and got the perfume and handed it to me. And she didn't say much, but there was just a weight to what she said next. She put the perfume in my hands and she made sure I was holding it. And before letting it go, she said, I'm giving this to you, but you have to get up and you have to promise me to please just hold on. We never talked about it or what she meant by please just hold on. But I know she's going to watch this and she's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. In this heavy moment, it was like an unspoken feeling and promise to each other that I would hold on to life just a little longer and I was not going to take my own life. I've shared a sentiment on my TikTok before where I feel like with certain lessons in life, if you don't empathize with other people in that position while they are going through it and you're just viewing it, the universe will put you in that same position so that you can learn to empathize since it wasn't enough for you to learn from somebody else. And I think that maybe this is just what karma is, but I think that I was experiencing my karmic payback this year because I finally understood why people quit after getting to that level and why suicides happen at an increasing rate now at that level. I'm not normalizing it and I'm not associating this mental health crisis only to the fact of being at high level of sports because naturally I can't attribute all of that only to being at a division 1 school or only to college sports because there's so many variables to the hypothesis and there's so many outliers. Like just because you're at a division 1 level doesn't mean you're mentally struggling. I would like to assume, I would hope maybe everyone's mentally struggling and no one's talking about it. I don't know. But I also think that the relationships, the friendships in my life at the time, the geographical state I was in, my familial relationships, my life experiences, my age. I mean, I feel like the list could just go on to contributing to that. But I also just don't feel, and I just absolutely don't think that it's normal that a sport can, even as little as influence, driving people into completely rationalizing suicide. Even if it's a weak mindset or whatever you call it, I feel like it's such a consuming disease because I've felt it myself. It does feel justified, however, to attach a huge piece of athletics to this disease because although we're humans before athletes and sports are just things we do and not who we are spending like 80% of our lives consumed in that, especially at the Division 1 level, and even more when you're in your respective regular season. Because it's not just the actual time that you're there, you're in college, you're at your school for 4 years, 5 years, however many years. It's all the time leading up to that. Like, you don't just wake up one day and end up at a school like that. You probably have been working 80% of your life. And even if not 80% of your life, there's been phases of your life where it was literally just your sport. So I feel like it's gotta have something to do with it. I don't know. This is why I say that I feel like the year that I experienced this heavy depressive state was my karmic payback, because I always used to see other people go D1 and then quit and think, damn, what a waste of talent. They just did all that work just to get there and quit. And I found myself almost in the exact same place where I was considering quitting on something that I had spent so much time working towards and something that I had thought was my dream and something that frankly now I know I want to do as a career post college, and I would have given up on that right then and there. When I hear of another soccer player that ended it or another football player that ended it or whatever, it hurts. But once again, you don't know how long that person was ruminating in those thoughts before they made the thoughts finally real enough to go out and do it regardless of how peak they were in the performance of their sport. In my experience, like I said, perspective is out of the window, and no good that has happened or good to be had to look forward to feels worthy enough to keep living to see it. I think that explains why sometimes we see these athletes that have successfully unalived themselves, like, and we think, oh my gosh, why would they do that? They were so good. They were like the best goalkeeper. They were a great quarterback, the best this and that. And it's like, they didn't care about that. Baby, the way I was justifying these thoughts, it was like I had seen enough life, is how I felt at 21, 22. In that state, girl, I was not caring about, oh, I haven't even allowed myself to fully experience an adult life with my friends, or I haven't gotten married, or I haven't had the joy of kids, or even thinking like, oh, I could just leave and be better somewhere else. I just didn't care. I was just like, I've seen enough, good or bad. I've seen good enough. I've seen enough good. I've seen enough bad. And the most exciting thing was to just be done with all of it, period. I didn't care about the future to come. It was a huge year for me in learning that if I'm having to choose between any person, any place, anything, any relationship, or myself, I cannot choose the other option. I had completely lost myself in sports and in relationships, but as cliche as it is, if you continue to choose something or someone else over you, there will be no you to make the choice again. And it's never that worth it, even if it feels like all consuming, like this disease tends to feel. This can be losing yourself metaphorically, where you don't recognize the person you've become, or physically losing yourself, like unaliving. No environment should ever have you feeling betrayed to a level that you're considering suicide as the easier option. And that lesson only came for me through deep, deep failure and genuinely peaking in my valley, like rock bottom. I'm grateful that God gave me the courage to leave those environments at the time that I did, because as I really believe it, the universe rewards you for making tough decisions eventually, even if the reward is not immediate. And I found that in my fifth year. I got propelled somewhere where I could not only relearn to have a healthy relationship with the sport of basketball again, but I also reconnected with my emotions, and I stopped having to numb my emotions for the comfortability of everyone else around me. I really regained my why for basketball and a clear reminder that this is what I want to do with my life for as long as my life and my body permit it. I definitely still had my little depressive state this past year, and as hard as it usually always is, it was so mild, like almost non existent compared to the year before, kind of similar to how it was when I was at my JUCO, because once again, like my JUCO, I was sitting on a bed of love and support given my environment. It was so huge for my longevity in this sport, but even more for my relationship with my body and trauma healing and becoming my own human and my own person and my own adult. This past year really helped me kickstart breaking down so many unhealthy habits and traumas and anxieties that I had formed around basketball, and even friendships and relationships for that matter. I really mean it when I say that I'm only still here alive to talk to you by God's grace, because I was in just a terribly dark place and my faith was the main lifeline. I think that's why I feel so confident in claiming to be a believer, because it's not by all the knickknacks of the Bible or all the knickknacks of organized religions, because I do think there's an aspect to organized religion where it was divine and it was divinely handed down, but us in our human sinful nature have poisoned a lot of these divine things. But I just know confidently that I am a believer because of the direct divine grace that I've personally felt. That grace is why the belief never leaves me, even when I get as far from my faith as I have felt at times. This is just my personal testimony, because I know with my whole soul that it's not just by my own will that I'm alive today. I do work really hard on my brain and my thoughts and how I can help myself and my loved ones feel tranquility and peace amidst chaos. And I read a lot and I have a genuine curiosity for all that type of stuff. And I do take really great care of myself, but still, I don't feel like I can fully take credit for the healing that goes on for me, because I know with my entire being that it's not just by my own works. I'm solely talking about my personal encounters with the divine, completely beyond what the church or priests or pastors or religious people or what anyone else has to say, because I'm literally no one special. If there's one thing I am, is a nobody. I'm just a random girl, a random sinful girl that makes mistakes, and yet I was worthy enough to be graced, just as I am. God knows I'm not perfect. God knows I'm 100% not sinless. God knows all my most evil and my most sinful thoughts and all my most evil and my sinful actions. And yet still, I was deemed worthy enough to be graced and to be met just as I am and to be fully accepted and adorned just as I am. I know the Bible says that we are called to bring people to Jesus and to be fishermen of people and whatnot, but I just don't feel that forcing my belief on anyone else or hating anyone else is bringing anyone closer to Jesus. So I'm not prescribing faith to anyone. I just know what has pulled me as Priscilla Varela through. Now, what can God do for you? I don't know, because that is everyone's individual journey to go through. I also think that this journey has a lot to do with belief and genuine deep faith in believing something that you can't see. And I really feel like it comes for people at different points and in different ways, and I don't know what the pattern or the rhyme or reason is. I just feel, though, that if you have the boldness to believe that the devil exists and that there's an underworld and that there's all the negative, you have to also believe that there's a God and the positive. But once again, this is just my opinion, and I'm nobody. I'm literally just a girl. I feel that this image that's preached of a perfect Christianity and a perfect, happy, pain-free life is what keeps people from committedly giving their life to the divine, because they have an expectation of clouds and sunshines. And so when they force themselves into trying to experience that, and when they don't experience that, they run in the opposite direction again and add more fuel to the bucket that reaffirms that God doesn't exist and it's all fake and it's all whimsy and fake. What? God is not whimsy. Like, I just, God to me is not whimsy and delusional in the slightest, because what exactly is so whimsy and lighthearted about having to sacrifice your own son? And even the son himself, like, Jesus cried about having to go on the cross and he did it anyways. What exactly is so whimsy about being hung on a cross, thorn down at your hands and feet? Mind you, when you were feeding the hungry and healing sick people, and you're hanging on a cross at your hands and feet. That that don't sound whimsy to me at all. Christianity to me is suffering and it's sacrifice. And the God that I believe in gave his only son to be tortured and hung on a cross in the name of this sacrificial love. Do I understand why there is a need for that? Absolutely not. Not yet, at least. I'm trying to, but I'm not like walking on a cloud of easy just because I believe in God. Like, I just don't understand why that's the thought process that people have. Maybe I look like it, but I don't. Where the cloud at? Show me the cloud. God is literally an emblem of pain and suffering to me, and pain and sacrifice. And he tells us himself that life is conflict and full of it. So why would I expect my life to be sunshine and rainbows? I think maybe I walk light and airy just because of my mindset now, and the fact that in a lot of situations I've given up my control to the divine and experienced this like otherworldly peace within chaos. But life is not light and airy. I don't know who said that. To me, life is conflict and life is pain and life is overcoming hurt and experiencing it again. So I would rather not be miserable in addition to experience the conflict that is already life by having divinely focused mindsets to make it even as little as 1% better to deal with. To me, that 1%, I mean, it's probably actually more than 1%, but that 1% was the difference between living and the alternative, because with being violently depressed sometimes, boy, have I exercised the muscle of beautifying the little things. Once again, I'm sitting on a bed of privilege in so many ways as I'm saying this, but I truly could be having a great day or the worst day of my life, but the feeling of the warmth of the sun when I step out of the car on any given day could just be what makes my day. Or the excitement of the first sip of a good coffee or a good matcha, or a really good hug or a really good conversation, or literally a really good sip of water when I've been thirsty. When I say it doesn't take much for me at this point. And those little things that are probably going unnoticed most of the time, sometimes when experience something like that, it's genuinely beautiful to me. And I'm like, life is amazing and life is good because I had a good sip of water. Girl, but actually, like, I really do feel like that. I really don't know everything there is to know yet whatsoever. There's a whole lot I don't know yet, but removed from any organized religion, all I know is that there is a God that was crucified and that never promised that I would have no conflict in my life. All he promised was that he was going to help me through it, and he has done that so far. I don't know about what the divine plans are. I don't know about suffering in the world. Baby, I'm trying to figure that out for myself and understand that for myself, because I don't know why God lets bad things happen. And bad things happen in innocent children's lives that are getting bombed in other countries and are literally getting removed from their families. Like, would it help my faith journey to have an answer to why such a graceful and good God would let these things happen? Probably. But unfortunately, however, lest we forget, I am not God. So maybe I'm unequipped to understand what the plans are and why bad things happen to good people and what the purpose is in those. I can now, through lots of reflection and prayer, rationalize why bad things have happened to me and the vital lessons that I needed to get from all those bad things. But even though it may seem contradictory to that and to myself, I have a really hard time imagining that those innocent kids and innocent people getting hurt and stripped from their families can say the same. And I wouldn't expect them to say the same. I understand that humans can be evil and there's free will and there are consequences of free will, but it just feels so, so painful to think about the reality we live in today, that the same free will that God gave is causing so much pain and harm, if that's the only explanation for it. And although God is not creating the pain and harm, he's allowing it, supposedly. I don't know. It's really hard and painful for me to conceptualize it as that being a part of a greater purpose. I don't know if all of this makes me a bad Christian or a bad believer, but I'm just being real about where I am exactly right now, because I'm not going to preach something that I don't know. As much as I've grown up in the church my whole life, I feel like a new believer in some ways, because in my time in college is when I feel like my faith has really been tested for realsies, rather than just blindly following what has been fed to me since a child. I'm reading the Bible as much as I can. I'm working to make it every day, but with a focus more on understanding rather than reading in quantity, because I think it's important for me to fully be knowledgeable about something that I claim to believe in. I'm really trying to understand all of it and what it really means for me, completely removed from what the culture or the megachurches say, and removed from just absorbing other people's experiences. I'm really trying to move solely from my own experiences and also what I'm researching and understanding myself on my own time. Of course, I wish I was a super strong, never failing Christian, but I'm honestly not there yet. And to get there, I need to be real with myself about where I'm actually at right now, which is not there. I often struggle with this thought in other aspects of my life, even career, where I just want to be everything I want to be and I want it to be right now, today, at this here age of 22. But that's just not how these things work. I want to be a never doubting, always seemingly faithful and consistent prayer closet, prayer warrior that it just looks like some Christians are. I want to be beautiful and internally genuine and a great human and of good nature and a great heart. And I just have this desire to be everything I want to be right now, today. And sometimes that has given me a slight anxiety. But the discomfort that I've had to sit in recently is that to get there, to be those things, I don't need to beat myself up right now for not being there, but I need to be brutally honest with myself about where I actually am and where my feet are. I'm 22. I'm not in my final form as a human. And so far from that, actually. As much as I wish it were different, I do have my doubts about my religion as it relates to the churches, and I have to force myself to pray sometimes. I do have to force myself to go to church sometimes, and it does take discipline sometimes for me to sit and read a devotional or sit and read my Bible because sometimes I don't feel like doing it. But no amount of beating myself up and guilting myself for missing church or shaming myself for acting out of emotion, no amount of beating myself up is going to fix it and fix the fact that that's where I am right now. If anything, beating myself up just keeps me in the same place, but now with an additional layer of shame clouding me on top of what I already feel, which is insufficient. These things will only change as I continue to force myself into the initial and very, very difficult discomfort of having to admit that where my current position is imperfect. Anyways, guys, for the most part, um I don't let that ruin my being. I don't let that turn me into an evil, insecure brat. And I do have my days for sure, but for the most part, I'd say I'm happy and fulfilled as a human being in my own life because I am also very internally focused, especially now. I'm essentially living in oblivion. I'm mostly unaware of what other people got going on in their lives. So I live in oblivion, basically. But anyways, that's it, guys. It's all behind me now. I hope. Like, I can't do that again. But yeah, I hope it's all behind me. So I felt like I could talk about it all finally. But I don't want this to be like a feel bad for me session. I'm just speaking in gratitude and lightness now, and maybe it's not a unique experience. But yeah, that was it. If you would like to keep the conversation going, you can follow at the PM Rule podcast on Instagram and TikTok. And you can email your suggestions or thoughts or questions or ideas to the thepmrulepodcast at gmail.com. Or you can follow Priscilla.Varela underscore on TikTok or Priscilla underscore MV22 on Instagram for more of me. And that's it, guys. I'll see you next Tuesday.